Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and today, like all Tuesdays, I'm pretty excited. But I feel like I'm extra excited about this one for a handful of reasons. For one of them being that women's health is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. Maybe because I'm a woman, but also because I've gone through my own healing journeys as a woman in this area of my own life and have come out the other side, and while incorporating herbs and holistic ways of looking at things, have found a lot of solutions to problems and have had some success on my own self. So always am excited to talk about this subject. Now, my guest today is Pétri Mesa, and I've had her on the show back in June to talk about her work as a midwife, a student midwife, sorry, a doula, and a birth keeper. And, after our initial conversation, I was just like, wow, this woman's knowledge comes from such a deep well. And I know she's very passionate about her work. And so her and I have been talking on and off, behind backstage in chats, whatever you want to say. And after my V for Vagina show, she reached out to me and had posed the idea of what if we together did a show where she could bring her knowledge as a former OB-GYN nurse, so have more of the technical side of things, and then I can bring more of the holistic herbal side to some common ailments that women go through, and we bring that together and we bridge the gap, and we can kind of just like flow and allow things to come out and see what happens. And so tonight we're doing that. So without further ado, help me in welcoming Pétri to the stream.
Oh,
there you go.
There I am.
Yay.
I
Welcome.
was lost for a minute. Hi guys, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks to see you, or thanks to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Super excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. So, yeah, thanks again for all you're doing and the inspiration for this episode, because you were the one, as I said in the intro, that kind of said to me, like, hey, this would be awesome if we blended this together, because you have so much knowledge on the more clinical, technical side of women's health. So, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it just kind of came to me in hearing your last episode about these women's issues, because I do have so much dismantling and so much unlearning to do coming from my medical background. So kind of almost in a selfish way, I really did want to do this show because I am eager to unlearn, and I am equally eager to learn the other side of things. So I'm super, super excited to be here.
Yes, as am I, because you're going to fill in the gaps for me where I don't have that clinical knowledge, and so that's why I think this is such a lovely idea and it's such a lovely pairing. So, before we really get into it, I'd like you to be able to introduce yourself and let people know where they can find you before we really start rolling.
Sure. So, hi there. I'm Pétri. I am a student midwife with the Indie Birth Association. I'm very proud to be a student midwife. And I am also a birth worker. I'm a birth doula, as well as I offer end-of-life care and bereavement services for people who are grieving or nearing the end of their life or experiencing loss. And I am a former nurse, and I had that experience through many specialties, but I specialized mostly in obstetrics and gynecology as well, mostly obstetrics, most recently OB triage. And I am so excited to have finally realized how much I did not resonate with that system and see it for what it really is. And so I left. I left in 2021. So and I never looked back. I never looked into going back into the medical system after that, as a nurse especially. And yeah, I've had so many great experiences along the way. I found indie birth. I found a whole community of radical birth workers and like-minded women. That's been just incredible. And I've had the opportunity to travel, and they have retreats. And the most recent was just this past month in October on Oahu in Hawaii. And it was just incredible. It's always a learning experience. The spiritual aspect is always acknowledged and present, and the energy is just always so beautiful and lovely. And I recently decided to try to reach as many people as I can with what's been on my heart and my mind coming from the medical system. And so I did just recently start my own podcast called the Earthside Birth Podcast on Spotify and Apple and wherever else, iHeartRadio or something like that. And so I've got a few episodes up ready. I hope that you guys will take a listen. I welcome any feedback or constructive criticism, as I am super interested in self-expansion and growth. So I welcome all of that. And you can find me at my website, has all my contact information. It is earthsidebirth.org. And my business is Earthside Birth Services.
Yes. Lovely introduction of yourself. I love that. And man, I was so excited for you when I saw that you started the podcast. Because there is and your delivery and your confidence and your encouragement for women to trust themselves and trust their bodies, it just really comes through in your episodes. And in particularly, I loved your episode about ultrasounds and your viewpoint on them, risk factors. You put out a very short video on Instagram basically talking about like, just because it's routine doesn't mean there's no risk.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love that standpoint. And so if you want to kind of go into that just a little bit before we kind of dive into all the things that we want to talk about tonight, because I think that sentiment goes along with what we're going to talk about, because, the standard procedure or the recommended services that a woman might be shown that she needs to do, they actually might be a little more risky than what we're told. So let's kind of just start by talking about that sort of mentality.
Sure. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear, and I think that people just don't realize, especially when they're in the rhythm of seeing these type of very highly medicalized providers that are kind of going about things with this attitude like it is just fine because it is so common and we do this all day and every day. But, there's a way that they kind of take the individual away from the equation there and just blanket everything with like, yeah, it'll be fine. Well, and there's no acknowledgement of somebody's whole body. Spiritual, mental, emotional bodies as well. It's only physical, unless, things kind of become blaringly obvious, like in an emotional or mental sense, and then they kind of have to address something. But there is no holistic approach to conventional medicine. And one of the things that has really always bothered me is how frequent ultrasound is used and how haphazardly it's used. And now, while of course there are absolute legitimate reasons to do that, there are actual concerns and reasons to get medical reasons to get an ultrasound done. What I expressed in this episode is that it builds up so quickly. And a lot of the time, if we just have patience and also nurture our other bodies, our spiritual, our emotional, our mental bodies, and build trust in ourselves, in the process, in our babies, that a lot of the times things work out on their own and resolve themselves. But there is a lot of fear. And, if you have so much fear, for example, I experienced a loss before I conceived my daughter. And when I did conceive my daughter, I was so crippled with anxiety after my loss because I had not nurtured what needed to be nurtured yet, that I would have very quickly gone to get an ultrasound just to make sure that things were okay. I was very in that mindset. And it is a reflection of the inner work that really needs to be done. That there is more work to be done. It is not just a physical level, and ultrasound especially is not without risk. And there's a lot more information that medical providers are just not quick to tell you, if at all. So
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I just think that, this not only happens with ultrasounds, with pap smears, with, also male health as well. This doesn't just, it's not just women, even though we're focusing on women's health, obviously, but we're all kind of under attack in some sort of way, especially when you're going through the Western medicine system.
definitely.
It's standard of care, it's standard procedure, there's no questions about, your emotional health, your past history. A lot of times they'll ask questions like that, but they're just going to do what they're told to do. And that, like you said, can actually cause a lot more damage than not. And most of the time, like you also said, some of these things will just clear up on their own because our bodies are built to heal. They're
Right.
built to sustain themselves. When you treat your body right, when your terrain is healthy, you're going to be healthy. When your heart and your mind is healthy, that will be reflected in your own health. So, there's a lot of things that go into our health. It's not just it's not as simple, I think, as they say, but at the same time, it is real simple. So it's about
Definitely.
finding the balance, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's also really important to really always remember that medicine, the medical industry, it is a business. First and foremost, it is a business. It is about profit and it is about money. And so when you look at a lot of these technologies, it makes sense why they're used so frequently and why they're so quick to recommend certain things, because it's lucrative for them, especially with the insurance costs and the lack of reimbursement that they get from the insurance companies nowadays. There's this whole political side to medicine, and it has become where we used to have these private medical offices with a doctor that knew you and your whole family and everybody in town, and like it was a personal thing. That is not the case. It is about expansion. It is about quantity over quality. And that's just, I mean, it's very obvious. It's not an opinion. It's not an attack on any doctors. I'm friends with a lot of doctors. I have respect for a lot of people in that position, but it just is what it is. Call a spade a spade. It's not anybody's personal stance, but it's the system. And, it's not anybody's fault, but this is a system in which, we work now in the medical field as healthcare workers. So,
Yeah, indeed. So, I mean, people can go back and listen to our other episode if they want to hear more about like how you came to realize, why you wanted to leave the industry, because we did talk about that. So I highly recommend checking that episode out. I don't remember the number of it, but it was back in June.
in
So
June, yeah.
yeah, so just head to, might be on my YouTube channel, go into the live tab and search for that episode, and you'll find it, and you'll be able to hear more about those sorts of things and Petra's decision to leave, because tonight we have a lot we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to go through, and we'll go through what we can, and we will get started. So we picked out a couple. Well, I actually suggested a few ailments because I kind of went off of things that I talked about in my V for Vagina episode, but also things that seem to be very common for women that pop up quite a bit. So the first one that we were going to get into is HPV and abnormal pap smears. Now, this is super common. I just by your smile, I can tell
It's a big one.
you got a lot to say. Yeah, there's a lot. And so let's jump into it. right away. And so let's go into abnormal pap smears. And maybe if you just explain what that might be, the umbrella of things that would fall under an abnormal pap smear.
Sure. So, as most people probably know, HPV is a virus, the human papillomavirus, and it is a major cause of cervical cancer. So that is why they do a pap smear in the first place. There are many strains of HPV. Not all of them cause cancer. Some of them cause genital warts, and some of them cause cancer and things like that. So, there's not just one virus. Just I wanted to make that clear because I think that people don't realize when you say HPV, it kind of is like, people don't realize that there's more than one strain of that virus. So they recommend you get a pap smear starting at age 21, and then they repeat it if it's normal. They repeat it for every 3 years. They don't routinely screen for HPV on those pap smears unless you get an abnormal pap, and then they'll probably start doing that. What they do is they'll take the specimen and they'll send it to the lab, and they'll run it with what they call HPV reflex, which means if it comes back abnormal, they'll run an HPV. So they kind of have that option. They do that until age 29 every 3 years, as long as it's normal. And from ages 30 to 65, they start recommending every 5 years. They push it back a little bit. When I started as a nurse, they were still recommending getting it done every year. So I just wanted to make clear that things change all the time. Recommendations change, guidelines change. This, to my knowledge, is the most recent guidelines in gynecology. But it has been a few years. I've dusted the cobwebs off as best as I can. And I am not a doctor. So please don't take every word that I say as the word of God, as they say. So, and look into it yourself. This is all available for everybody. Anybody can learn. And I'm a big advocate of doing your own research as well. So, but anyways, once you hit 30, they do automatically run HPV with your pap smear. So that's a change, that they are always looking for cervical changes and the presence of HPV actively. So you go in, you get your pap smear done, and you get a call from the nurse, and they're like, all right, well, we have this result, and it came back a little abnormal. There are a few that could mean several different things. So one of the things it can come back as is called ascus, or atypical squamous cells of undetermined significance, ascus. That is basically a variation of normal. As far as, in my opinion, it's just kind of like a variation of normal. It's not a big deal. Anything can cause that kind of result. Any kind of change in the pH, any kind of disturbance in the pH of the vagina can cause that. Sex can cause that. Different times of your cycle can cause that. Diet can cause that. So that's not really anything to be concerned of, but they are likely going to tell you, okay, we see this little abnormality, even though they're not really going to do anything about it. Unless it comes back positive for HPV, they may want to repeat it in a certain amount of time. They'll probably repeat the PAP, probably maybe 6 months. The next grade of dysplasia, cervical dysplasia, are these changes in the cervix that you see in the cervical cells. The next grade is called low grade changes. There is low grade and there are high grade changes. These are all precancerous, considered precancerous. Low grade is very mild. So when you look at a specimen under the microscope, you're only going to see a few of these, the numbers are low. The amount of cells that are changing are very low. And majority of the time, just like ascus, it goes away on its own. So they, with low grade, they will it will go either way. Sometimes they could recommend a colposcopy depending on your history. If it comes back with HPV, they will likely recommend a colposcopy. And sometimes even with ascus, if it comes back HPV positive, they will. It depends on kind of like the conservative nature of the provider as well. So you see like some other providers where that will be like, okay, well, like, let's just repeat the PAP. And others are more like proactive in their treatments and their diagnosis. So low grade often goes away, as I said, on its own. It is like the most mild form of precancerous cellular changes. And then there's high grade, and high grade can be moderate to severe, or lead into carcinoma in situ, which is cancer. So on a PAP, you will see ascus, you'll see low grade changes, high grade changes, or something called agus, which is another kind of dysplasia, another kind of cervical change. So if your PAP comes back as high grade, whether it is HPV positive or not, they are going to recommend a colposcopy. And what a colposcopy is the diagnostic part. So the PAP is a screening, and the colposcopy is more of a diagnostic tool. So they will have you come in to the office, and what they do is they take this big fat Q-tip, and they paint your cervix with vinegar, with white vinegar. And they take like this specialized telescope, almost a specialized scope that they look through. That does not enter your body either, this particular scope, because some of them do, and depending on the procedure that they're doing. But this is like something that does not have to go inside the vagina, this scope. So they look at your cervix through this scope, and any abnormal cells will be present through this scope. They'll be able to see them. And they will take a biopsy of those specific areas. They will also do what's called a curettage. And so they take a tool called a curette, and that is a like really long, skinny metal rod. And on the end of it is like a little loop. And it kind of looks like one of those metal dog brushes. And what they do is, so like if this is, hold on, like if your cervix is this, like this is the donut of your cervix, they'll take this little tool and they will put it just inside the cervix, and they will collect a little sample of the cells that are inside your cervix. And they will send that off to the lab as well. So those are like the two different specimens that they collect in this procedure. And so depending on how this comes back, either they will continue to follow you, either 6 months to a year, depending on how the results come back, or they will do more of a treatment. If it comes back severe or like going into cancerous, they will recommend what's called a LEAP procedure. And the LEAP procedure is an electrocervical procedure. So they actually ground you. They put this little, like, they slap this thing onto your leg that grounds you, because they're using actual electric during the tool. Is, yeah, it will, yeah. So you have to like kind of take all of your metal off, all of your jewelry, and they ground you, and they numb your cervix with lidocaine, with a cervical block, similar to like if you get a dental block at the dentist. And what they do is they use a tool, this electric tool, that is like a loop. It's a wired loop at the end of it. It looks like a pen, And at the end, it's like a wire that's looped around. And they will take this electrified loop and they remove the face of the cervix. So essentially, they're like slicing off the face of your cervix to remove those cancerous, precancerous, cancerous cells. And so they'll do sometimes one or two I've seen. I'm sure that they would do even more if they felt that it was necessary, depending on like the grade of the dysplasia and how far back they felt that it went. But I've seen like 1 or 2 slices at a time, and that's how they would go about treating that. And so, as you can imagine, it's scary. It can be traumatic. It smells terrible.
I believe it. My cervix is puckering as you're talking about this. Swear. Oh my God. She's like, no.
Yeah. This can be like, and they can use this more as a further diagnostic tool as well. So they do, like, I personally have seen it to treat like severely precancerous cells. But they do, from my understanding, use this to further diagnose as well. So, wow. Yeah, so that is the allopathic process of, and they would also, some doctors send you to like GYN onc, an oncologist, a gynecological oncologist, for a second opinion, or to like do these procedures themselves, or like really go over all of your options with you too. So that's a thing, is and it's like, for somebody who has a lesser degree of this, even high grade, even like CIN2, which is like moderate dysplasia, it's like, it's scary to be like, okay, I'm going to send you off to a specialist now. And so yeah, I'm really interested to hear your take on everything, as far as like the whole HPV thing, because because I'm dying to know.
Well, I gotta say, I appreciate you running through all that, because there's a lot of things that I didn't know. There's things that I've researched on my own and kind of found out, knowing about the leap, but not even knowing the name of it. You told me that that's what the name of it is. I know that there's a procedure where they'll go in and burn the cells off that are abnormal and things like that, but I didn't know to the extent of what that whole thing was. Had no idea about the grounding, all this stuff. Now, when I think about this, and when I think back to myself, so when I was preparing for this show, so 14 years ago, so when I was a young doe, 26, I had an abnormal pap smear, and it was actually the first pap I had ever gotten. And so I was freaked out, and I had gone to, Planned Parenthood and all that stuff. And, they wanted to do procedures on me. And I actually said no. And I was like, you're telling me that there's like a 90% chance that I'm going to be fine. Or it was something like, it's actually kind of cloudy at this point, because it was so long ago. And when I realized how long ago it was, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, well, and then I went back in time with the person I was with and everything, and I was thinking about all this and how nervous I was about it. And I remember telling my mom, and, her being afraid. And I was like, I think I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to let this be what it is. And, and then about 4 years later, I had a pap smear, and it was normal, and there was no issues or whatever. So from my research with HPV, and what I've listened to people talk about who are more in the mindset of like terrain theory or German new medicine, is that, this is actually not even a thing. So if you're going off of what we look at with COVID and everything else, the research that I've come across is that some of the testing they do for this, and I could be wrong, but from what I've learned, is that it's basically a PCR test, very similar to the COVID test. And that, like you said in the beginning, there's so many factors that could make you have abnormal an abnormal pap smear, that it's hard to say what it actually is, and that HPV is actually not even a thing. Okay. Just like they've told us about HIV and the whole thing, that it's kind of like around that same, it swims in the same pool as
Yeah.
COVID, HIV. What is it? Okay, we don't know. We're just being told that we have to do these very invasive procedures that could actually be the thing that causes the cancer. That's how I look at it. So, hearing you describe that procedure, I'm thinking to myself, how could that not cause something, whether that's going to be emotional, spiritual, physical, or all three, that is going to bring something on that might look like cancer, or that might look like a growth, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm just like, wow, I again feel like there's this huge scare tactic, just like there was, to have this unnecessary stuff. And then you have the Gardasil vaccine that was
Yeah.
introduced. Okay. So Gardasil comes on the scene. And from research I've done back in 2006 is when this came out to the public. They're giving it to young children. They're giving it to girls. They're also giving it to boys, saying that this is going to prevent this. La-di-da-di-da. But my question is, though, were people injected with Gardasil? Were they given HPV? Were they actually given the cell, I don't even call it a virus, but whatever that is that would produce that in your body, or maybe make your body produce it? Were they given that with that vaccine? And then correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it that Gardasil can encourage sterility?
Gardasil can do a lot of things.
Okay.
And I have heard that also, the sterility, but my biggest issue with Gardasil is, why are we pushing this vaccine instead? And at such an early age, they are pushing this vaccine to 12-year-olds. Like, they want children to have this vaccine before they become sexually active, in order to prevent the spread of HPV. Now, why are we taking the energy, the resources, the money, the time to pump these children full of this vaccination, instead of teaching them safe sex?
Right.
If that is the cause of cervical cancer, if that is how HPV is spread, why are our resources being used to shoot kids up with I don't know, maybe it's I don't know. That's a really good point. I also know personally, and I won't get super detailed into this because it's not my story to tell, and I want to be respectful of this person. But I know a doctor that will not give that vaccine.
Oh,
And what had to happen was, it had to hit close to home, unfortunately. And one of the things that can happen, more so in males, more so in boys, from what I understand, is like severe tachycardia. And tachycardia is a rapid heart rate. Normal is the range that anything over 100 is considered high for your heart rate and considered tachycardic. And so this can have an effect on your cardiovascular system and on your heart rate. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. And this person was hospitalized and had to be monitored. And it was very scary, and it hit really close to home for this provider, and to the point where he would not give it anymore. He wouldn't order it for people. So unfortunately, that is the case. A lot of the time, it has to hit home for people to, I mean, in any situation, whether it's medical or not, it just, we take a lot of things for granted as humans sometimes. And until it becomes our reality and a part of our real life, we kind of can just, it's easy to brush it off sometimes. So yeah, I have a big problem with the HPV vaccine. And yeah, I have a big problem with that.
Yeah, rightfully so. I just think that this is one that, they really harp on it and really make it seem like it's a bigger deal than not. And it's not to say that, I would never discourage someone from, checking in and asking questions and being concerned and stuff, right? But I just think that the way that this rolls out, the way that the information about it is in the mainstream or in the Western medicine world, I'm hyper sus of it because of this. And women like Amanda Vollmer has taught me a lot about this as well. Just listening to her live streams. There is another doctor out there. Her name is escaping me, but she has a whole article, videos all about this, about her research as a terrain theorist doctor, talking about how you actually really have nothing to worry about when it comes to this one. But if you go through with the procedures and all of that, that's when you do have something to worry about. And it's just like anytime they get your hooks in you in that Western medicine, when you get to that certain point where there's a point of no return, I feel like this is unfortunately what happens to a lot of women in this situation, because your body then is going to try and, heal itself while you're getting these procedures, which is usually going to create things like warts or thickened skin or abnormal cells, because the body is just like, what's happening? Why are you sloughing this off? Now I'm going to make it thicker. Now I'm going to produce more skin. Now I'm going to produce more discharge. And so that's kind of like what the German New Medicine side of it is that basically, like, a lot of times these tests or the sheer news that you might have something like HPV or whatever literally will make the cells abnormal. And it's because you heard that, and your emotions and your everything is connected to that. And so then your body goes into healing mode. And a lot of times when you're going into healing mode is when you have your symptoms, when you have the stuff that comes up that might look strange or whatever. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, for pulling in the German New Medicine side of it, and everything else. And from an herbal standpoint, I would say, if you were told that you have an abnormal pap smear, they're not sure what it is. It could be this, it could be that, my first go-to is always calendula, and either making yourself calendula suppositories or sourcing them from someone or a company that you trust. At changing your diet, someone in the chat, Susan, had said she healed an abnormal pap by, changing her diet, I think it was, and quitting smoking. It's the little things like this, and so again, if you want to know more about the herbal side too, you can check out my episode V for Vagina, because I did talk about a few other things. But the calendula is my first go-to. Comfrey root is another one, and you can make a really wonderful suppository for yourself out of cocoa butter and coconut oil with calendula and comfrey root, some turmeric, and a few other herbs. And you will be shocked at how much healing can happen, actually, because a lot of this stuff is really based in inflammation. And so you can also follow something like an alkaline diet for a few weeks, bring inflammation down, cutting out all the things that make us inflamed, like the sugars and the refined carbs and all the things that we all know inflame us. These are the things that they're not going to tell you at the doctor's office. They're just going to say, we'll do this procedure, we'll give you this vax, and then you're good. So that's kind of my take on it. Yeah.
I love that. And I was just about to say that there is obviously a tremendous amount of research showing that all disease really stems from inflammation and from the inflammatory process within the body. So getting a procedure that is going to scar your cervix and cause more inflammation doesn't really make sense if that's the case, if our diseases are stemmed and rooted in inflammation in the first place. So, but I loved what you said about just the sound of it, just hearing, because it goes back to all your other bodies. And what I was saying before is that it is an attack on your emotional body. It is an attack on your mental body. And a lot of the time, I could even argue perhaps all of the time, when you see these kinds of things, there are like diseases in the physical body. It is a reflection of something in your other bodies that needs to be tuned and aligned. Something is not right in another aspect of your body. And so the biggest problem is that we don't know that. We're not taught that. Medicine does not look at things like that. It is physical. It is on a cellular level, right here, right now. That is what it is. What you see is what you get. And if you have this, you're going to get cancer. And if you don't get this procedure, you're definitely going to get cancer. Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't take care of any other aspect of the human body, of anything that really needs to be nurtured in us to be whole and healthy. So I really loved that you said that.
Yeah, I mean that I'm glad it resonates because that was one of the first things that resonated with me when I started studying German new medicine was like, well, what do you know? The actual diagnosis can be the thing that's like the nail in the coffin, you know?
Right.
And it's unfortunate and it happens every single day. And we have a really good friend whom it happened to with his wife. And ironically enough, he's written a book on German new medicine. He's studied it for years. He's translated books from German to English. And this exact same thing happened with his wife. And like I said, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's almost like the universe and God has like shown him like he's on the right path. Like he was given these, these just like glaring signs of like, no, this is what's happening. He watched it happen in real time. And it's just like, it's mind-boggling. And before we move on to our next subject, I just wanted to talk about how the cervix is connected to basically all sexual conflicts that you might have. So that could be you find out your partner's cheating on you. You don't want to be having sex for some reason because it's painful, or you're afraid, or you've gone through something that you haven't really assimilated yet. And you're almost allowing yourself to have sex with somebody against your will, but not in a rape sort of way, but you're doing it because you feel like you have to. There can be all sorts of these sort of sexual conflicts that we have, and they manifest in certain areas. And so that is just something that should be looked at as well, and known that these sexual conflicts can manifest in a lot of ways, but that's one in particular with the cervix. There's also like a territorial loss conflict that could be happening. So you feel like you might be like out of control in this area of your life or something like that. So, again, like Petra said, do your own research and stuff, and you can look into these things, but it's all connected.
And again, everything that you're saying is going back to your emotional and your mental bodies. It's rooted in our trauma, which is unhealed trauma. And there are people that have claimed that I've even seen speak that have had severe diagnoses of basically cancer, cervical cancer, and claim that they have healed this by healing their trauma and by addressing also not just the sexual trauma, but particularly the mother wound, because anything related to your womb space can trigger the mother wound. Anything that is going to bring up any kind of maternal issues. And it doesn't even have to be your issue because it's in your blood, because our trauma is handed down by the generations through your blood, through generational memory. And so at a certain point, where does that hereditary aspect come in, right? Oh, it runs in my family. And my family in particular has cancer, is particularly breast and gynecological cancers, like rampant throughout my whole mother's side of my family.
Wow.
Why? It's something else is going on. Like I don't buy into my mother handed down these cancer cells in my DNA. It runs in my family. No, but I definitely believe that trauma is handed down, because on an energetic level, we are, and I talked about this a little bit in my last episode of my podcast, where we start out in our existence in this world is as an ovum in our mothers while they are in the womb of our grandmothers. all of the emotional, all of the mental, all of the spiritual, all of the physical ailments that are plaguing our foremothers, we have an energetic absorption of that. We have an energetic exchange of that. And so it makes sense how these things can be handed down, particularly in women, in a generational sense. So the other thing, and I know you probably want to move on, but
No, I say we just swim wherever the water's warm, baby, because this is great.
The other thing, I mean, this might be a good segue into, because this is kind of just like encompasses everything, but going back to inflammation, look at the food that we're being fed, and every single thing that is in our food causes inflammation. If you're not having real organic food, there's something in it that's going to cause an inflammatory response in your body. So they're attacking you on the physical level. They're causing inflammation in your body. Then you're going to the doctor and you're getting these tests done. And you're hearing this diagnosis of something might be wrong. And they're attacking you on a mental and an emotional level. And now you have to go home and get your spiritual body, try to keep that intact.
Right.
So it's a full body assault. And that's my take on that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's a great take. And it's something that needs to be talked about a little more. I know people talk about health, we talk about food, we talk about the importance, but what's the deeper level to all this stuff? What's predatory about this? There's so many things that are predatory that are being shot at us, from all towers or whatever, but this is one that it's across the board. Women, children, men, you name it, animals, we're all kind of under attack and in this like experimental freaking I don't know, firmament thing that's going on, and we got to meander it. And that's why these types of conversations are so freaking important. So
definitely.
Yeah, let's continue. I don't know what order you have your notes in or whatever, or if there's something that's standing out to you that you want to move on to next. I say we go for that.
Oh, no, nothing in particular. I think that next I had bacterial vaginosis.
Yeah, same.
And so BV is just it's so common. And so either you have it and you can have it and have symptoms, and you can have it and not have symptoms, supposedly. So it can come back on a pap smear, or you are symptomatic and you go to the doctor and you go, something's wrong. I'm having irritation and discharge and a little bit of odor, and what is happening to me? And they'll do a culture, send it off to the lab, and it'll come back with whatever, yeast or BV or something, an infection. And with bacterial vaginosis, they immediately will throw an antibiotic at you. It's a bacteria. They are going to kill all of the bacteria in doing that, of course. Or they'll I have seen really midwives, more medicalized midwives, but midwives nonetheless, recommend boric acid. But they don't ever talk to you about your diet. And they don't ever talk to you about what could be causing this, and things like BV and yeast. Some women have that regularly. Anything that causes, again, just like that one low-grade cervical dysplasia, ascus, anything that causes an imbalance in the pH in the vagina can lead to some kind of infection or some kind of symptoms of an infection. And so they never talk to you, even when it's recurring or an ongoing problem, well, what are you doing? What are you eating? What's happening here? Because to every once in a while, some women just have it regularly, leading up to their periods, that you're depending on where you are in your cycle, like I've experienced that myself. Like right before I start to bleed, like I'll get like irritated or have something going on where my menstrual cycle takes care of it and I don't have to worry about it. Um, but it's just the coming days leading up to the bleed that like the pH is kind of thrown off. And they never talk about the possibility of steaming or using
Right.
herbs in that way. And like now I wouldn't like perhaps I wouldn't recommend doing that for yeast because yeast grows in moist, warm environments. So steaming might not be. I mean, like you could try it, be my guest, but like in theory, like it doesn't sound like that would really, it sounds like it would encourage more fungus to grow. Um, but like with bacterial vaginosis, like I don't like there's no research. We don't, we don't know. It's like a foreign concept to them. So it's just not talked about at all. But like I don't see any reason why steaming is not like it's like what is it going to do? Really? Like to use a an antibacterial or an anti or an antiseptic kind of herb in a steam sounds like it would be better than systemically taking an antibiotic that's going to kill absolutely all of your gut health and everything else. So, in a system that allegedly starts with the least invasive and the least risk and moves up that ladder, it's like, but are you really doing that? It doesn't really seem like you're really doing that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is such a good one because it is so common. And I remember when I had a normal pap smear, but it came back with BV and I had never even heard of it. And luckily, I was seeing a naturopath at the time. And so she was who gave me the pap smear. And so I was given more options. So that is another option for women out there. If you're wanting to, have a little bit of a different route, you can seek out naturopaths that have the ability to give you gynecological exams. And obviously, they'll still run tests and they're going to do all that. But she had suggested, actually inserting high quality probiotics into my vagina. And that was the first place I started, and that really helped. And then the suggestion of food, which was really good. But I remember just being like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean that I have this? Is it an STD? Is it just something that happens? And whatever. And kind of like what you explained, basically like the pH is thrown off and the bacteria is thrown off. So it's out of balance. And I also remember making myself suppositories for this and being very good about it. That's the other thing when you're treating stuff like this, especially naturally, you have to be really consistent, especially with something like BV. What I found was that, using the suppositories for 7 days straight, like no matter what, every night, you're inserting it and you're allowing it to do its thing and you're observing your body, you're being gentle, you're taking care and all those things. And the combination of the probiotic and then the suppository that I made, it cleared it up. And I wasn't having symptoms like because she asked me, she said, is sex painful? I said, no. Are you noticing anything weird, discharge, whatever? And I really didn't have any of that stuff. Nothing that was like not normal. You know what I mean? And kind of like what you were talking about leading up to everything, leading up to bleeding, that I was like, yeah, nothing out of the usual, same partner for years and this and that and the other. And so anyway, this one too, yeah, it's like vague, I think, but not, it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the steaming, I think, would definitely help. And I would recommend something like chaparral, which is a desert plant. This is a protective plant. This is very widely used in wound healing salves, anything dealing with like an open wound. Great for wound washes because it is going to counteract any harmful bacteria that might be going on. And I think the yoni steam just in general is really healing because you're focusing Just focusing that energy on your pelvic region, on your uterus, having meditations where you're surrounding yourself with a healthy, visions of a healthy uterus, balanced vagina. These are the things that you can help, with that will help with the emotional side of all this stuff. And when we look at the GNM standpoint with just the vagina in general, the biological conflict is sexual separation. So you could have been maybe separated from somebody that you didn't want to be, or that you wanted to be separated from somebody or some act, and you weren't allowing yourself to separate. And something could come up like this, where there's an out of balance. Now things are out of balance because you're not listening to your inner voice. You're not listening to your heart. You're not listening to that deep thing that's telling you, like, I don't want this right now, actually. And that's okay. And so, like, I think that's a big thing. That's a big conversation to even start. But how many times, if you're with a partner that you love or whatever, sometimes you just don't want to have sex and the other one does. And you have to be okay with saying, I'm not in the mood. And your partner should be okay, whether it's a man or a woman,
Right.
saying, okay, cool. Because if you're not honoring that, that's when these sorts of things will pop up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I also heard, and I've seen people try garlic, whole cloves of
Oh,
garlic.
yes.
Yeah. And everybody always it was always a big to do when a woman came into the office with cloves of garlic inside of her vagina. It was like all anybody could talk about was like the weird hippie with garlic inside of her. But it's like, whatever, try it. But if you're going to try that, the only thing I will say is like, make sure that it is completely whole. Like, I mean, obviously peeled, but whole, because if there's any break in it, it will burn very badly.
Yeah.
So like, just make sure that the whole clove is intact before you give that one a try. But yeah, I love everything that you're saying. I think it really it's crazy how all of these issues come back to our overall all of our bodies, our trauma and our emotional and mental and spiritual bodies. So yeah, there's a big conversation to be had about that. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that when you start to look at these sorts of ailments from that standpoint, it gets less scary too. Not saying it's not scary to, of course, there's fear that comes when you are facing these bigger conflicts in your life or traumas or whatever. Yeah, that's going to be a big undertaking. But, the flip side of it is to not deal with it. And then all the things we're talking about tonight are the things that manifest with not dealing with it. And again, just like paying attention to your body is really great. And one or two other remedies I'll say for this. I was going to bring it in with me, but I forgot. But Tippy Canoe Herbs makes a wonderful tincture called Low Tone. And that was one of the tinctures that I leaned on with BV. And also when I realized that I was like holding tension in my cervix, just because I hadn't 100% dealt with a few things of like my conflict with feeling guilty for feeling pleasure, because I had hangups with sex because of just my experiences in life. And I realized I was holding tension there. And it was because of those feelings of like, oh man, well, I feel like kind of bad. Not like I felt bad for feeling pleasure, but there was something subconsciously that was like, there was something going on.
There's some guilt.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it was always coming up during that. And once I started leaning into using the low tone, my emotions started opening up. We had big conversations, and lo and behold, I noticed that I wasn't feeling that anymore. But it wasn't until I started processing it and bringing it out. And another thing with inserting probiotics, you can use yogurt. Can be messy, but that's also an option if you don't want to buy like a powdered probiotic. Those can be very expensive. So if you have access to, organic grass-fed yogurt, that's great. That's definitely a great option as well to help balance things out.
I think that like the minute I added raw unpasteurized Greek yogurt, like real yogurt, without the crap, without the sugar, and as well as fermented foods, like these issues just like completely cleared up.
Yep, that's a
Definitely.
great point.
Definitely. The one thing that that came to mind with what you just said was Susan Weed's 6 Steps to Healing. And like we often don't, the first step is to do nothing. And
Yes.
so it's really important when we hear these kinds of diagnoses or hear these things that like, oh, you have this you know, that these things that overwhelm us, it's really important to just stop and do nothing and think and check in with your other bodies. How is this affecting me emotionally? How is this affecting me mentally and spiritually? Where am I? Like, you have to tune in with your whole self and not just act on the physical level, because we are so much more than what we see here. We are so much more than our physical bodies. And the other thing that came up was about guilt. And that I think is a big thing with women, because so many of us right out of the gate are told that we're not allowed to be sexual and we're not allowed to experience these things, and like sexual pleasure is not okay for women. And a lot of people who have gone through who have been raised in like really religious families, very, you know, very, very serious about sex in that regard, it is a big deal. It's hard to move past that guilt. Guilt, when we're victims of sexual trauma, of assault and rape, it's easy to feel guilt. It's easy to feel guilty, and it's easy to harbor that regret that you know, we in a way somehow allowed this to happen to us, or it's somehow our fault, because a lot of the time we hear that in society. Oh, she must have been asking for it. Oh, what was she wearing? Blah, 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 blah. And
Right.
so it's very easy to have that guilt. And so when you have all of these traumas attached to your womb space, it's like, of course, you're going to see shit come up on the physical level, because all of these things are not being addressed in all of your other bodies. So it's, yeah, definitely the guilt is a big thing.
Yeah, it really is. And man, I'd love to. I'm like, as you're talking and as we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh, we'll do another show on this and another show on that. And I just want to go and hang out with her at her house. So
Come on
yeah.
over.
Oh my God. So yeah, no, totally. We're on the same wavelength with this. And I'm grateful for you. So thank you for just
Likewise.
being here and sharing all this stuff with us and me and
Yeah, no
everybody here.
worries.
All right. Well, we talked about endometriosis a little bit, talking a little bit about it. You know, I'm not super familiar, and that you said the same, but I have a little bit of knowledge on it. So we're just going to touch on this one. We're going to talk about what we know or what we've heard, what we've studied about it. And have you had any experience with a woman who's had this that you've either been in proximity with while you were working as a nurse, or heard any stories about it?
I only have had friends with endometriosis. I actually have not really had patients with it. Again, like my latest specialty was obstetrics. So I really haven't seen this on a clinical level, but I mean, what it is, if you don't know, is the endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus, the lining that thickens and sheds every month with our menses, and the process continues month after month. It thickens and it sheds. So endometriosis is when these endometrial cells, the endometrial tissue, grows where it's not supposed to grow. So outside of the uterus, it can be on the bowels, it can be on the bladder, the ureters, the diaphragm. It can be like anywhere kind of really in the abdominal cavity, on the ovaries, especially. Like I think that's the most common, is like on the ovaries. And so it causes a tremendous amount of pain, because again, this tissue thickens, and it's not just like something that just like, it's like, hey, here I am. It's like it actually does something, like, so it thickens, and you get excruciating pain with endometriosis. The cysts, that I know, like, that's another topic you wanted to go into. You can see cysts with it called endometriomas. Those are on the ovaries, and so they're cysts that are filled with blood, just like you would with your menstrual cycle bleed. So it's a blood-filled cyst caused by these endometrial cells, the endometrial tissue being on the ovaries. And what they do for this is, of course, hormonal therapy is like number one. Hormonal therapy, they will try to balance your hormones with more hormones, and NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and pain meds. They will try to just numb you from the pain so you can deal with it and get by. And they will also do surgery at times. And I guess what they would do is just remove that, if they can, from whatever structure it's on. That's kind of like a speculation. I'm not sure, but I know that they do surgery for it.
Yes. Okay. This is it's checking out with like the research I've done with it too.
Cool.
Yeah. And I only know it from, because I'm interested in this topic, I'm always kind of seeking things out. So I've listened to interviews with women who have it, and listening to how excruciating it is. A lot of times they'll tell a woman that it might interfere with them being able to become pregnant, or their fertilization of an egg, or they might not be able to carry a baby because of this. And a lot of times it like goes back to this inflammation thing. But I with the German New Medicine, they see this as, obviously it's a uterine problem, but they see it when they do their brain scans, that it's actually in the area of the brain that controls the ovaries. And so that it may be more of like an ovarian issue, but it's treated as a uterus issue. So even in your body and your brain, when they're treating it as a uterus issue, it actually might stem from an ovarian issue. So right away off the bat, they might not actually even be treating it correctly, which could lead to other things. This is just speculation. I don't know, but just putting these pieces together of how
Yeah,
they look at it, I'm like, oh, okay,
that's
well,
so interesting.
isn't it
Yeah.
interesting? I was like, whoa, that's a pretty big one. And, talking about, then if it is ovarian, a lot of times, obviously, hysterectomy becomes a thing that might be recommended for somebody if it's so
Yeah.
bad that it looks like there's no way to, remedy it, or something like that. And then obviously we know that there's many consequences from something like that, because you're never going to have the same hormones. Your adrenals can't produce enough estrogen to make up for what will be lost if you don't have ovaries. So that kind of thing. I don't think that it's not happening to women, but kind of like with the HPV thing, it might just be being looked at from a totally incorrect angle, which is definitely something to be suspect of. And yeah, I mean, I don't even know. So when a woman is diagnosed with this, is it literally because they're seeing these blood-filled sacs, or do they diagnose it from just pain or inflammation in the uterus?
I can't exactly say because I'm not familiar enough with that. But what I do know about the diagnosis is that it's very hard to diagnose. And a lot of the time that women are not believed that they are in that much pain. And a
Yeah.
lot of the time it is pain that is not just local to your wound space because it can affect other organs in the body. So, so it can be hard to diagnose. And again, like, the anti-feminine, like, we don't believe you thing that is like kind of constantly happening. Um, but what I have heard from people, from friends, is that fragrances, anything that triggers your hormones or like throws your hormones off, can cause it to flare up, because with endometriosis you get flare ups. It's not like it's like 0 to 60,
Okay.
and so anything that can disrupt your hormones can cause this excruciating flare up. And one of the things that has helped some people is cutting out fragrances, artificial fragrances, out of their lifestyle. Um, because, and it's really, really interesting to see how the olfactory system, like, I feel like people don't really understand that. Like, to typical people, don't understand how important your olfactory system is and how everything that enters that system does affect your body. It can spark it directly sparks memory. You like, it affects you on a psychological level. It can bring you back to a place and a time with a certain person, um and but it can also disrupt and alter your hormone production, especially when it's this fake bullshit that they put into everything. It's like, I'm not talking about essential oils and things that smell nice. Like, the fake crap that is everywhere
Yep.
is destroying your hormones. And so that has helped people, cutting that out. And again, going back to inflammation, avoiding like inflammatory foods and getting on a that kind of diet where you're like really aware of what you're consuming, helps, because again, one of the treatments is NSAIDs, is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So you can do that with your food. I mean, and I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm sure that, it's excruciating. I've had friends with flare-ups of this. I've seen women go through this. And I know how devastating and how painful it can be. I've seen it. But um, changing your lifestyle, I'm sure, getting into the routine can help, and I'm not saying like just kick the drugs and, start your diet, but start incorporating these things into your diet. And maybe you can get off of the NSAIDs, because it's going to do the same thing. It's going to have the same result in your body, the anti-inflammatory aspect anyway. So yeah, I thought that was super interesting about the fragrance, though I had no idea.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, big time, because the woman I'm thinking of who I know suffers from this or deals with it is all about Bath and Body Works, the plugins into the wall that smell like flowers and this and that. And I'm just like, you can suggest things. It's up to the
Yeah.
person if they're going to do it or not to eliminate it. But that is a really interesting tidbit, and that's really helpful. And I bet it's going to help other people out there, because yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And if we're dealing with balancing hormones and stuff, there's a lot of herbs that you can lean on, but one of the more popular ones that is easy to incorporate and tastes actually pretty good is maca root. That could be something that you can like incorporate into smoothies. You can incorporate it into meals, into treats for yourself, into drinks, into tea, into chai. And just from personal experience, you putting a teaspoon into your tea every day for a month or two, you're going to notice a difference, and it's going to help balance things out. And so there are all sorts of things that you can lean on for that. If that's what they're telling you is causing it. So something to think about.
Super interesting. I mean, and touching on the fertility being an issue with this particular diagnosis, the the treatment of birth control pills and they want to suppress your hormones so you don't menstruate, so you don't have this thickening of this tissue. And so it makes sense when you're pumping yourself full of hormones and suppressing your body's natural cycle that you would have eventually a hard time conceiving. So, and I'm not saying that that's definite and that's everybody's experience, but it makes sense how that could be a thing. So,
yeah, totally, man. And we also know too that there's so many things that we're bombarded with that are endocrine disruptors that, it's a thing. So
it's a thing for sure.
Well, all right. So moving on, we were going to talk about cysts and fibroids and those sorts of growths that can happen, whether they be uterine or ovarian. So let's get into it.
Sure. So ovarian cysts, what always really pissed me off was that I was really old when I found out that your body makes cysts every month. That you actually it's a normal thing that as a woman, one of your ovaries typically will make a cyst every month, and it fluctuates on either side. And so there are functional cysts that are supposed to happen. The follicular cyst, which is the cyst every month you make this follicle, this follicular cyst that I'm sorry, you're from the follicle is where the egg is released.
Okay.
And sometimes for whatever reason, if the egg is not released or it just continues to grow, instead it becomes a follicular cyst. It still is usually not a big deal. They don't do anything about it. And it really doesn't typically lead to issues. The other thing normally is something called the corpus luteum. So after this egg is released, the corpus luteum is basically a temporary organ that is made to produce some extra hormones in the beginning of pregnancy. And so whether you get pregnant or not kind of just determines whether that goes away or whatever. But sometimes kind of similar, like the follicle, for whatever reason, it doesn't go away and it turns into a cyst. And again, they don't typically do anything about that. Those are considered functional, that don't generally cause any problems. And that's where that usually ends. There are other cysts, cyst adenomas, that they kind of are on the surface of the ovary. And so not with the follicle is inside of the ovary. So if that becomes a cyst, that's kind of on the inside. This is on the outside of your ovary. And that can be either fluid or kind of thick mucousy kind of filled. Then there's dermoid cysts that consist of other tissue that's it can be hair and skin and things like that, dermoid cysts. The endometriomas we kind of talked about already. And then there's certain kinds of cancers and things like that that can appear as cancerous cysts. But I'm not really how they go about diagnosing them. When they become, it's hard, with something like PCOS, I guess is what I'm kind of getting at. That's a really hard to diagnose as well, kind of like endometriosis. A lot of women struggle with pain and with things like that, and it's very hard to diagnose. and they'll send you for blood work like during certain times of your cycle to kind of get an idea of like your hormone ranges, and they'll do sonograms. And if they don't do a sonogram while you're kind of having this flare up of these cysts and they don't see anything, you don't usually get diagnosed. And I think that's kind of changing now, where they're kind of diagnosing you on your based off of your symptoms, because it's been so problematic to diagnose, and so many women are going without the diagnosis and their treatment. But again, diet is a big thing with regulating your hormones. And so that can affect ovarian cysts. Something like PCOS, they will, oh goodness, what is it called? Inositol. And what it does is it regulates like your blood sugar and your hormones that way, and it's like kind of staples you out. And that is something that can help with like PCOS and the hormone aspect of that, inositol. And I know women that have started that and like had really great success with that. So, but other than that, I mean, they might like, surgery is always a thing. Like if it's really bad or to the point like where nothing is working, they will recommend surgery. But yeah, particularly with PCOS, I think diet and that inositol is kind of what they do. And of course, birth control and hormone therapy.
So they'll suggest a woman gets on birth control to manage the cyst.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I've seen that. Mm-hmm.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they'll do that for like acne.
Right.
In young girls or whatever. You're 17 and you're not sexually active, but you have acne. Oh, take birth control. Well, all right. So not the best option, but
Yeah.
it's not surprising, I guess. So okay, this one is interesting because it is so common, and a lot of my knowledge about it has come from Susan Weed, who has talked about just like what you're talking about. A lot of these are benign. A lot of these will clear up, and they're not going to be issues, but it becomes an issue when someone says, well, we can go in and remove it, and we can do a biopsy on it, or we can do this or that. And I'm sure there's ways for them to look at these cysts and know if it's going to be more like a cancerous thing or benign or what have you. But I think that as you said, I was really glad you brought up her 6 phases of healing or whatever, of the do nothing kind of thing, and allowing things to just be for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
One of my first suggestions for women who have talked to me about this stuff is, I know it sounds woo woo, but it's womb meditation and it's visualization of this cyst shrinking. And that's another thing that I've learned from Susan Weed. So, viewing this, like you get this diagnosis, okay, we have this, and then you're doing meditations however often that you feel like you need to. I would say daily, until you start to see improvements, of your literally visualizing that the cyst is shrinking, that it's not an issue, it's not hurting you, it's not harming you, it's benign, and it's going to clear itself up on its own. Now, I'm also, understand that we can't just think everything away and like whatever. Obviously, you have to be proactive with the things you're talking about: diet, exercise, what you're putting in your body. I saw Jessness in the chat talked about, removing caffeine. All these little.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It is a great one. And I also notice balance comes when I'm not consuming caffeine at all, or I'm consuming it on a very low level. My menstrual cycle is always more balanced. My cramps are way low to nothing. You know what I mean? Like things like that really come through strong when caffeine isn't involved in your life. But in German New Medicine, this is a conflict of an implantation conflict. So you're maybe thinking that you're not going to be able to get pregnant, basically, is kind of what's going on. Maybe you've been told you weren't going to be able to become pregnant. So you start to have a conflict around that. You might look at yourself as less than, oh, I'm not a full woman, maybe because they told me I can't have a proper, or I won't be able to be pregnant or whatever. That could cause this sort of conflict to happen, which could then cause some kind of growth, or it's a procreation conflict. So that would be something like a miscarriage, an abortion, not getting pregnant. You have something where there was a loss of something. This could spark a cyst or a fibroid, anything like that. Um, Interestingly enough, too, there's something called an attack conflict, which could be related to literally having a procedure, having a surgery, or it's a verbal or a physical attack by a spouse or a person you love, person you're close with, a person you're intimate with. So all of these things, your environment is so important. The people you surround yourself with can also play big roles in what happens with our health, as many of us who are probably listening and talking know that you are kind of who you hang with, sort of thing. You are what you eat. These things have real life consequences or real life implications, and so that is so important. So if you're finding yourself having these repeated kind of conflicts, and you've gone in and you're doing this internal work and you're questioning and you're looking back and you're taking time, well, also look around at your environment. What's going on? Who are you talking to? What are you consuming? What kind of information? This, that, the other thing. All of these things totally come down to it. So there's also like the humiliation that can come from some of this stuff that can also lead to conflicts. So just like you were saying, the multi bodies, the generational trauma, or just the way that you view yourself is a huge thing, especially in GNM. And to also know that when and if you were to have a diagnosis like this, a lot of times when the symptoms arise, that's like a healing phase. Your body's trying to heal. So instead of fearing it, or instead of looking at it like a death sentence or something super horrible, looking at it as an opportunity to learn about yourself more, to learn about your body, to learn about what your body resonates with, what it doesn't resonate with. And that's one of the things I appreciate so much about GNM, is that in and of itself, because it allows you to be empowered and it allows you to be in control of your body. And as you've talked about, trust that this is happening because you're supposed to learn something. You're supposed to use this as a way to gain knowledge so that you can not only heal yourself, but in turn walk down the road and meet up with someone else that might need the knowledge that you just learned because you had this pop up for yourself. So that's where my mind goes with this kind of stuff. And as far as remedies for this, I really love Vitex, also known as chastity berry. That's a really good one that you can do, or you can start taking. I recommend that as a tincture. And again, with the sitz baths, if you can find yourself some wonderful comfrey leaf and start doing sitz baths with comfrey leaf or calendula or rose, violet, some of these herbs that are not only going to help with inflammation and help with like building tissue, healing tissue, but also the emotional side of a lot of this stuff is really important to talk about as well. And I wanted to, as I usually talk about motherwort a lot. But as we've talked about mother wounds, we're talking about women's health. When you're dealing with anything like this, there's an emotional element that must be taken into account. And as we've brought up through every single one of these ailments, how connected the emotions are and how important it will be to nurture yourself on an emotional level as well, and know that there's going to be hella emotions that come up, and that plants and herbs and supportive people are going to be medicine for you during these times, and to not be afraid to like talk about it as well, and to just, I guess, trust, in your body. And I have a couple other things that I thought were really interesting that I've come across over the years. But in Chinese medicine, a fibroid is looked at as like stagnant energy or stagnant qi. And that will cause like a stagnation of dampness in the body. And that's what we're dealing with. You're dealing with something that could be fluid filled. There's damp, warm areas. So there's like a stagnation there. So movement is very important. That's where ememagog herbs come in to play. If you're not pregnant or you're not trying to get pregnant, emmenagogues are going to bring heat to the pelvic region. They're going to bring flow, and they're going to just like allow healthy blood to flow to that area. And that's what you're really needing. That's why something like calendula, like I've brought up for everything, it's one of those. If you could pick one, I would probably suggest that for somebody because of that motion and that movement that happens. And then in Ayurveda, a fibroid is looked at as like an accumulation of emotions that are being stored. So you're accumulating all these emotions and you're not processing them, whether that be because you're literally not knowing that it's happening. It's like a subconscious thing, or you're choosing to stuff it down. And that's where these sorts of growths and stuff like that, particularly with the sexual energy or sexual subjects of your life, if you're stuffing that, that's where that can kind of come into play as well. So, yeah. And Susan Weed always talks about too, of just like how like overproduction of progesterone can increase growth of fibroids. That's one of her things. Some people talk about also once menopause starts, that these things can actually diminish like greatly. So I don't know if you have any opinions on that, because that's a really interesting rabbit hole as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I kind of just like completely forgot to bring up fibroids, even though you mentioned them.
Oh yeah, you're good.
So fibroids, from what I have seen, really just go monitored. They just monitor the size of them. And if they get to a certain size where they're like affecting other things, or they become painful, or whatever the case is, they'll remove them surgically. So that is the extent of my knowledge with fibroids. But I love the hormonal aspect that you just mentioned, because that makes a lot of sense. And the emotional and the blocks of energy that, like, it literally is, it's a fibrous mass within the lining of the uterus, like so embedded kind of in the uterus. And so it makes sense that that would be like a blockage of energy flowing through your womb space, especially if you have those issues regarding the mother wound and sexual trauma and things that have gone untouched and unhealed in your life. That makes so much sense to me. And I think it's kind of poetic in a way. I think it's really beautiful. Like that you need the movement, that's like part of the healing and the treatment is the actual movement, because like yoga and things like that, that's the goal, is to get the movement of your body. It's not like to exercise that's been, popularized here, like
Right.
like aerobic yoga classes. It's like it's for the connection of all of your bodies and on the physical realm, to get the movement going through all of your systems, all of the systems of your body. So I apologize, I don't really have more of an experience clinically with fibroids, other than I know that they do surgery for them.
No, it's good, because now I'm thinking, I think I just said cysts, and I don't know if I brought up fibroids when we like initially talked about it, but I figured it was like they're kind of in the same. They're different, but it's like kind of that same. So my apologies, because if I threw that in without saying it.
Yeah, like I mean, I've definitely seen women go through pregnancies with fibroids just fine. Just fine. So even with the fluctuations of your hormones through pregnancy, it doesn't mean that your fibroid is going to affect it. It can, if it, gets big enough to where it's causing issues, but like I have not personally seen that be the case. So like just because you have a fibroid doesn't mean that it's going to affect a pregnancy either.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And, one of the other things we talked about bringing up, and we can do it briefly because wow, I mean, we've packed a lot in like an hour and a half. It's pretty amazing. But I brought this up in my V for Vagina episode, but self exams. So doing a self cervical exam or, at home, and that you can do it and that it's safe. But a woman with your experience would be able to tell somebody like myself or others listening. Let's say you get the kit to do your self exam, you're excited, you pick a date, you're ready to go, you do it. And what are things that we could look for that would be something that we would be like, okay, well, I should take a note that I see this here. Don't know what it is, but I see something. And are there things that we should be just more aware of than others? What do you think about that?
I love the idea of self-exams because the best way to know what treatment or what you're experiencing is to know your body better than anybody else. You like to have a doctor look at your cervix and say, this is what it is. Just it's the same kind of relinquish of power that we give to doctors through our birth experience. Like we're relying on somebody else to tell us what's what to do, how we get to the other side of this. And so when in performing self-exams, getting to know your body is the best idea because you know your health, you know you're healthy, you know what is what. And I mean, particularly as far as looking at the cervix, I mean, if you don't know what it looks like, they describe it as a donut, like with a little like kind of indent. It's not really a hole, but like a little donut with like a indent in the middle. And so, like, if you know what healthy tissue looks like, it's pink. It's a membrane. So, healthy pink tissue, it's usually moist. Vaginal discharge is normal, but if you see anything discolored that you have not experienced before, it might be a sign that something is going on. Any kind of discoloration, like spots
Okay.
on the cervix, is typically not the sign of a normal healthy cervix. So I mean, I've seen that once, and I'll say that too. I have been in an exam. I've been assisted with a lot of vaginal exams in offices, and I have only been present for one exam where the doctor was like, "Get me, I need to do a punch biopsy right now."
Oh,
Like
wow.
it was very obvious that there was like a dark spot on the cervix. So, if it's to that point, definitely maybe talk to somebody else. That's not me, but my biggest suggestion is just to get to know your body. I mean, like you can even look at cervixes on the internet. Like there's plenty of pictures, on the internet of what healthy cervix looks like. And so, but like your body is not the same as anybody else's body. So to get to know what is normal for you. We're all different, and there are variations of normal. But typically, redness, like irritation, like discharge, those are signs of either infection, but like red, swollen, kind of like angry looking, that sounds like inflammation, right? So anything like angry looking that looks like it's kind of like swole and mad at you, you might be experiencing some inflammation, which again could be the cause of any of these things that we've discussed, and maybe worth looking into to see what is actually going on. Yeah, but
Yeah.
pink is happy.
Nice. No, that's great advice, and you're right too. I mean, I think just if women out there are like intimidated at the thought of a self-exam, start with the internet search of, of images, because I just remember doing my first self-exam and just being like blown away because is like, oh my God, that's what it looks like.
No,
Like
it's
that,
really in there.
it's really there, And I'll always remember too, like when I did my first suppository, and this is like an intimate detail, but inserting it and then like kind of feeling something like a lump or whatever. And when I went to my gynecological appointment with the naturopath, I told her, she's like, so have you noticed anything, or is there anything you want me to know before I do the exam or whatever? I was like, well, I noticed there was like some kind of like lump or whatever. And, she's like, okay, well, I'll look and whatever. And she said, I don't see anything. She goes, you're probably feeling your cervix. And so it's just like, wow, what a concept. Like you're never told that, you might be, feeling that if you are using something like a suppository or whatever. And another thing that I think about with all the things that we talked about, particularly like the inflammation or the irritation or whatever, is tampons. And I'm not a fan, haven't been a fan for a long time. And when I started to realize that tampons were actually causing me to have really horrible, like worse cramps than I already was having, because I remember thinking like, I heard, who did I hear say it? I think it was Susan Weed. And she said something to the effect of, it's a time for flowing, not plugging.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that's pretty profound. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, yeah, why am I plugging myself up with with the blood? Obviously it's being absorbed by the tampon, but then it's like in there and I'm plugging this natural flow that wants to flow outward.
Definitely.
And yeah, that first time of just being like, all right, I'll go back to pads like I did when I first started. You know what I mean? When you're like 13 or 12 or whenever you start your cycle. And I feel like they want society kind of always looks at menstruation like from a normie standpoint as like gross, or you want to kind of like conceal it. And I think that's why tampons are kind of a thing. And so just noticing that and thinking how much irritation a woman might feel just from using a tampon alone, and how that could affect, your cervix or whatever at some point.
Definitely. I was just gonna say, like, for me, what comes up is that it stems back into how we're taught about our bodies in the first place. Exactly what you said. Like, it's an inconvenience. It's gross. You can't have sex when you have your period. And like, first, like, who told you that?
Right.
First of all, like, who made that rule? But okay. But like, just how we are conditioned to view our bodies and our natural cycles is so backwards. It's like it all happens for a reason. And like, going into what you were saying about like, it's a time of release. Look at anything in your body. Look at when you get a splinter, if you don't take it out, your skin is going to push it out eventually, right? So look at like other natural body processes. Like, it doesn't belong there. So you're having cramps because your body is probably trying to get it out because it doesn't fucking belong there. Sorry. It doesn't.
Oh, you're good.
It doesn't belong there. That's not what goes in there. Your body is like, what are we doing here? This is not what I said was happening today. Like, and so that it makes sense why you have these normal, even intense reactions to inserting something inside of yourself that doesn't belong there, that your body knows is not supposed to be there. And it's a way of keeping you healthy and keeping you safe in your body is get it out. It doesn't belong here. It's a foreign object.
Yeah, I love that. I know. It's like once we start, and how simple of a concept that is. And you don't think about it at all when you're just going along to get along and doing what they say. And this is great. And your mom used tampons forever and this and that and, whatever. And it's literally a lack of education and a lack of just thinking with common sense.
Definitely.
and critical thought.
And they're not without risk either. By the way, they get stuck Okay.
Yes.
And then
Mm.
you have to go to a doctor to have somebody else take your tampon out. That happens. I have seen that a bunch of times. And then you are embarrassed, you're humiliated, and you're usually in a lot of pain because sometimes it's been a few days and you're like, did I take that tampon out? And you have no idea and you just can't find it. So, I mean, that's a thing. It happens. No judgment. Like, please, like, don't think that I'm coming from a place of judgment. That's not me at all. But it's just not supposed to be there. And they're full of fucking chemicals. So, like, why would your vagina want anything like that anywhere near it? Like, like, so it makes sense why you would have these kind of, like I said, reactions and like intense cramping to try and get, like, there's more than just that endometrial lining that your body is trying to expel. So
Yeah, and just to end this one on the point of not being embarrassed, I'll just say you bringing that up gives me a memory that happened to me where I had 2 tampons in, and I remember I was just starting to not feel well and, like, getting crampy down there, and then I'm like, "What's happening? Like, am I gonna have to go to the doctor?" Whatever. And I took out the one tampon that's like closer to the surface, the latest one I had put on. And I went number 2 and emerges a tampon like from deep within the bowels of my uterus. And I'm like, oh my God, I'll never forget the feeling. I'll never forget it. I was in Mario's bathroom in his old apartment, and I'm just like, oh my God. And then obviously I felt like an idiot. I felt
yeah,
embarrassed. How
it
did I
happens
do
all
that?
the time. It happens all the time.
Oh
All
my
the time.
God. So yeah, don't feel embarrassed out there if it's
Don't
happened.
ever feel embarrassed. Don't feel embarrassed about anything. Live your life, girl.
Yes, totally. So, wow. On that note, man, thank you, Petra. This was amazing. This seriously cracked something open, and I feel like we're at the beginning of a really awesome partnership when it comes to this subject and being able to riff off of each other. And this was great. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your research and coming on and taking time to do this and formulate a graceful way of putting this out there into the ether. And so before we say goodbye, please again let people know where they can find you and if there's anything specific that you want people to look for.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love coming on here, and your energy is just so intoxicating, but in like such a soothing, awesome way. And I love rocking out with you, and going back and forth is so productive. It's nice to feel productive. So I appreciate you sharing your space with me. Um, and yeah, you can find me at my website, earthsidebirth.org. And if you are interested, you can listen to my brand new podcast, the Earthside Birth Podcast.
Yes. Thank you, sister. And right back at you. And I appreciate the kind words. And this is just awesome. I feel really good about where we went with this. And I really appreciate you and all your work. So everybody go check her out. All our links are down below. And I'm gonna let you go and have a great rest of your evening. Hello to George and take care and happy holidays.
Yes, you as well. Take care.
All right, later. All right, y'all. Well, that was a banger. I knew it was going to be a banger. Had a deep feeling. Thanks for being here with us and allowing us to share some of this knowledge with you. And experiences. So, yeah, I mean, I think too, part of the healing process is sharing these more intimate, sometimes you feel like it's embarrassing things. And the more we do that, I think the more we allow other people to feel okay about doing that. And that's part of one of the reasons why I started this podcast was to kind of be my own mad scientist as I am in the herbal realm, trying things on myself first before I launch it out to the public, but kind of being a beacon for somebody to hear my story and then to maybe not feel as so afraid or whatever about their own situation. So I hope that what we shared today did that for you. And as always, I do have some updates for you guys here. So we'll pull up this slide. See if it comes up. Yeah, add it to the stage, bro. All right, michelleshealinghome.com for all things healing home. You can just go there, go to the website. You can now place orders. You can schedule consultations. You can read the blog. You can find all my newsletters, which are archived there. So you can head there for that. And my Cherie, thank you. She just threw up Earthside Birth podcast link, so you guys can find that as well. So hemp and honey soap, oat and honey soap still have just 1 bar. No, I have 2 bars of hemp and honey, 1 bar of oat and honey soap left over. All the rest of the items here, my comfrey nettle and pine shampoo bar, we will have that ready next week. I have a batch that's still curing, so that'll be ready to go next week for anybody who is liking that. Lots of people have been enjoying that shampoo bar, as I have as well. And you can see the soaps here in the flesh on the screen if you're wanting to see what they actually look like. These two are just really lovely. I love making soap. It's one of my loves. Honestly, I feel like I go into this like different alchemical realm when I create soap. And I pop out and I'm like, whoa, there's like all these amazing bars that are just coming out. So these two are really great and really lovely. 11/27, which is next week, Monday, the new full moon offering newsletter will be coming out. So really excited about this offering coming up for you guys. And all the patrons out there, thank you guys so much. All of you guys will be getting the full moon offering update a day before everybody else. That's one of the incentives of being a patron. So Chance, Sarah G, Liam, Amy, Miri and Hank, Jenny G, Erica, Moonlander, Spoons, Mary, Louie, Diane, Logan, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, Stephanie, Jennifer, Charlai, Peter, Elise and James, Amy, Rachel, Trisha, and my newest patron, a really great friend of mine who surprised me with becoming a patron, is Vanessa K. Vanessa Kapka, I love you, sister. You surprised me with that ad, and I really appreciate all the support from you and everybody else. It really is helpful, and it warms my heart. Patreon.com/thehealinghome if you'd like to become a patron. Next week, I'm going to do a solo show, and it's going to be a to be announced. I have something in the queue, in my mind, in my heart that I'd like to focus on. So I'm going to bring it to you guys next week, 11/28 at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I may pull Mario into this one as well, but we'll see. We'll see if he has his Tuesday night open. SymbolicStudies.com. Speaking of Mario, for all things Mario, go check him out there. And he actually just had a conversation today with Topher Gardner. So that will be coming out. I'm not sure when, but it's pretty cool that those guys got to meld minds together. It'll be really exciting to see what they ended up talking about. And with all of that said, I think that'll do it. So thank you again for everybody hanging out and anyone who's listening to this after the fact. I hope it helped, and I hope it brought some enlightenment to y'all and a different way of looking at women's health. Until next time, we will see you then. Take care. Happy holidays. Cheers.